I'm Sarah Myerscough, and this is the Insurance Brokers Podcast, where we're talking to the personalities and the businesses that sit behind our industry. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe on your chosen podcast streaming platform. Good morning, Adrian. Thank you very much for joining me again on the Insurance Brokers Podcast. As always, it's wonderful to have you here.
Hi, Sarah. It's great to join you, as always.
So today we are sort of doing an update to a previous podcast we've done, which is something that you guys do regularly at Ecclesiastical. And we're talking about the mental health and wellbeing survey and the results of that you guys have just done. Do you want to give me an overview about, for people that haven't listened to the previous podcast, about what that survey is, why you do it, and what's come out of 2022?
Yeah, sure, of course. I mean, it has been a 12 months since we would have done one of these because it's an annual survey. So for 5 years now, we've done a broker wellbeing survey. It's typically goes out into the field August, September time, and we had our results a few weeks ago. So the great thing about having some longevity now, 5 years, is that we've got some real comparisons, and we can see what, you know, that general broker market, how the shifts are in terms of everything relating to well-being, what's getting better, what's getting worse, what are general perceptions. And it's now proving to give us kind of sort of a real wealth of insight. And maybe today we might talk about perhaps some of the contradictions that are coming through in some of the results.
I think that would be fabulous, and having had an offline chat, I'm really interested to see where this conversation is going to go. And I'm also hoping that people listening, if you've got something you'd like to add to it, we would love to hear it. So make sure you do get in touch if you'd like to add your 2 pence to the contradictions. Before we go into the details of the 2022 survey, can you tell me a little bit about the aim behind starting 5 years ago? What was it that you wanted to build within Ecclesiastical?
So I think if we roll back all those years, we were very aware of this increasing importance of supporting our colleagues, and then that got us thinking about, well, actually, what's the level of awareness about mental well-being, and how are brokers being supported? We couldn't see anything really that was providing a benchmark or any insight into that. We've produced over that time, we've produced quite a wealth of material, different webinars. We've worked with mental health in business, and we continue to work with mental health in business today. There's a whole host of stuff, and most of that material, if anybody's listening, they can find that through our website. It all sort of lives on, and it's all there. But it was really to get that sense of, right, how are brokers really feeling about their own mental well-being, how supported they are, and then I think, if I'm honest, when we got to second year, it was like, actually, if we could create some sort of trend analysis here, and we can get some consistency with how we go about doing this, this could then start to add value in outer years. And 5 years in, I think it really is.
And you could not possibly have foreseen the last 5 years that's happened. If there's a time to have done these kind of benchmarks and surveys, the last 5 years has been it.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, that's probably one of the upsides of all the downsides of the last few years, right?
It is. I'd be really interested actually to see the analysis over the last 5 years, to see if you can almost see the COVID era. I'm talking specifically 2020, not the post-COVID era, but it'd be really interesting to see what kind of trends you're finding. Can you give me an overview of what you're looking at, sort of the broad themes that you've been pulling out over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I could do that by sharing with you some of the things that we've seen this time coming through, and how they particularly compare to last time. You make a really good point about the impact of COVID in the COVID years. And of course, we asked some specific questions through that period of time. And I think it's fair to say that because that was such a big issue and everybody was so kind of focused and caught up in that, it dragged some of the focus away from other areas. So, you know, the scores around, you know, how concerned are you, or how stressed are you directly by COVID, clearly was off the scale when we did it in 2020, and it's but this year is almost, you know, we've kept the question in there, but it's at a very, it's actually now at a very low level. What we really see is that stress and anxiety with brokers has continued to rise. And we've seen 4 consecutive years of stress and anxiety being reported as increasing. We've got record numbers of brokers this time actually saying they are overwhelmed. You know, they're overwhelmed by the demands that are being placed on them. But that's balanced in some way by, you know, 3/4 of brokers that responded are saying that they think their firms are really committed to improving well-being, and those firms are doing more than they've ever been doing. So that's another trend. We've seen brokerages doing more to support their colleagues year on year on year. So we've got this slight contradiction there, that despite doing more, people still feel more stressed. They still feel more anxious, and they're reporting that in the survey results. The top three causes: workload, that's right up there, regulation, pretty high, and customer demand. Those are the 3 main causes of this stress and anxiety that brokers are reporting.
Can I ask a question? In the sample that you've surveyed, is it a mixture of roles across brokerages? So from customer facing to sales to admin staff? Yeah,
it's probably worth me saying actually that this isn't us doing it. It's not skewed in any way. This is FWD. So I would say just about all of the survey material that we produce, we do in conjunction with FWD. So it'll be FWD using their broker research panel. So there'll be a spread of different sizes of business, different people in different roles, and all completely independent.
Do you have stats that show gender, age groups? Are there any that stand out as being more or less stressed or anxious, or more or less feeling pressure from customers or employers, or whatever it might be?
Yeah, and the answer to that is yes and no. We have some of that granular detail, but actually when we've looked at the results that have come back this time, we haven't broken it out in that way because there are really no differentials. I think I definitely remember when you and I spoke last year, we definitely had a conversation about, you know, the different impacts on different genders. We haven't pulled that out this time because it appears to be less prevalent this time. So hence the reason why we've just kept it at that sort of high level.
I'm not a psychologist, and I sometimes wish that that's the route I'd taken, because I find this fascinating. So I would be really interested to have a conversation about what you think the reasons are behind the increased stress and anxiety.
I think look, I think those top 3 causes everybody can probably associate with, right? So I think increased workload with, you know, frankly, if you're a broker or if you're working for an insurer, you know, we have a lot of conversations with our colleagues about the increased workload, and a lot of that increased workload is driven by uncertainty, ultimately with clients, you know, clients who are, you know, making decisions about what they want to insure, what level they want to insure for, you know, and looking at options. So I think that workload, I think we can all resonate with. We can all resonate with regulation, right? You know, we're a regulated business. we're a regulated sector, and therefore it's something we have to work with. But it can feel, and it's feeling this time based on the feedback, that brokers feel that at the moment that regulatory demand, what the regulator is looking for from a broker perspective, it has definitely increased. We had one particular comment, I know, when we looked at the verbatim comments from a broker who said, I love what I do, I love my business, but I've come to the end because of regulation. That's quite a very strong position to end up with, and I think it's about it's about finding a balance. It's about finding a balance in there, isn't it? And customer demand, I think, is just that same, wrapped up in that same workload. Really interestingly, it just didn't quite sneak into top 3. It just sat outside, and that is staff shortages. So for the first time, staff shortages got into the top 5, didn't quite get into top 3, and again, that sort of really resonates with me, because I know one of our biggest areas of focus will be recruitment and retention, and there's probably not a broker meeting that I have, or a broker conversation I have, that doesn't touch on the same issue. So I think the themes that come back in those top themes and causes that come back absolutely resonate, and I think I'd be surprised if many people were too contradictory about those, because we can see the external context.
A couple of points that I want to share with you and get your thoughts on. One is, I saw something on LinkedIn yesterday, maybe even this morning, by Michelle Leach, Insurance Marketeers Group. I think she's fabulous. And she's just put a link to a podcast called Insurance for Cucumbers, which I thought was a really cool title. And what that was about was the recruitment issue, was bringing young, fresh talent, the variety of careers available in the insurance industry, and really trying to boost that message. So I haven't listened to the podcast yet, but I will. I literally just scrolled and thought that was brilliant. So anybody listening, definitely go and do that, and then share it, because I think the recruitment shortage is not specific to the insurance industry. There's lots of industries feeling it. I phoned my dentist earlier to change an appointment, and the message said there are no appointments this side of Christmas because of recruitment issues. So I think it's a huge problem. Yeah. And that obviously feeds into customer demand, workloads, and even regulation, because there's less people trying to do more things.
Sure.
But I wonder how much each of these 3 issues or 4 issues that we've touched on, there's actually a bigger issue sitting behind it. And you mentioned it at the beginning, and it's uncertainty brought on by change, because everything has changed since COVID. We're more virtual, more digital. There's an awful lot out there about using technology to streamline processes, to make things more efficient, and there's a very specific demographic, and I include myself in that find technology quite difficult. So there's a level of change and uncertainty that sit behind issues that have always been there, but they just pop up in different ways. And I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, I pick up on what you were saying about the podcast that you'd seen. I completely agree. I think the insurance industry is a brilliant sector, and we do some fantastic stuff. But God, we really undersell ourselves. Don't we undersell ourselves? And there's some great roles, and there's some great careers to be had. And yeah, I think telling that story about the industry is really important. So a little plug for something we did this week. We ran a young broker training session specifically aimed at bringing, and okay, these are these young people that have already chosen to come into the industry, but specifically helping them around understanding aspects of risk management, understanding what the insurer lens is on the broker. How can you get a better result from your insurer relationships, basically. But yeah, we're a great industry. We do undersell ourselves, so anything we can do to improve that, absolutely. Change, uncertainty, yeah, I think you're right. There's a really interesting contradiction at the center of our of our survey results this time, and that is I've talked about all the things that have kind of worsened, and yet people are feeling actually really confident about recognizing signs of stress and well-being, super confident they've got the right tools, reporting an increase in being supported. They've got the reporting that for the fourth year on the run, an improvement that in the attitude at work, and commitment from employers. Yeah, the thing that's gone backwards, and this is the bit I don't understand, right? The thing that's got backwards is that half of the people that responded to the survey don't feel able to report it at work. Don't feel able to report how they're feeling and this impact. And actually that's the fourth year that that's gone up. So what's not working? Because we're all talking about mental well-being more. We're all providing more support. There is more openness. We recognize it more, and the survey says we recognize it more. The survey says we're all getting more stressed, but why are we increasingly reluctant to talk about it? I don't really know. I don't have a view particularly about why.
It's really interesting. I was at a conference yesterday, and the pre-drinks the night before, we were having this conversation. It wasn't insurance industry, but it was business, B2B, large corporates. And one of them was saying that he'd recently joined the team and they had a virtual weekly catch-up, and one of the people attending the catch-up had kept their camera off and had said to this large group, "I'm sorry, my camera's off. I cannot get out of bed today. I'm so low. I'm so unmotivated." And this guy was like, "Whoa, that's new. This is insane." And then the conversation was talking around how generally it's more open. Now, the group that I was sitting with having this conversation were, I think I was probably the oldest, and I'm 39. I then switched to another end of the table, and I was talking to the MD of Brother UK, and he was talking about how with the culture within his firm, he saw status as a bar to being able to be open and talk about all of these issues. And basically all of the senior team, he took their car parking space away because he realized that the car parking space that you work to get your, 2 lines on this piece of tarmac was I've made it. And I've made it through experience doesn't necessarily equate to impact and influence. And he wanted to kind of wipe it and to let people know that this was a much more open culture. And it was so he did this big thing, and it signaled a very big change in the culture of Brother UK. Really interesting, not contradicting, but really interesting different takes on it, and a little bit at odds with the contradiction we're talking about here. So is it insurance? Is it broke? I wonder. I'm so interested to know.
I don't think it. I suspect it isn't unique. In fact, I'm positive it won't be unique to the insurance sector, the insurance broking sector. I don't think that will be the case at all.
I wonder if financial services as a whole has taken a really hard rap over the last 3 years. Has that helped or hindered this issue?
Look, I think it could be a contributory factor. I think for me there's probably a watch out, and the watch out here is that people are feeling more stressed and anxious. Businesses are doing more, but in some way it's not landing, and not in our survey, but in some other conversations and some other work we've been doing with a few other groups around about mental well-being. One of the bits of feedback there has been, we get so much now. There's so much material that we get access to, and we get sent emails from HR or wherever it might be all the time, and it's kind of just like noise. And I think there's a watch out for us always to think about that generic guidance, that generic work that we might all doing versus personalized support. Now, not quite sure what I mean by that. We could, but there's something in thinking like, tick, we're supporting people because we're doing loads of stuff. There's loads of noise versus sitting back and saying, what do people really need? What support do they really need? And are there some people that need more and would benefit from more? Your example there of, that's somebody being very open, isn't it? Saying, do you know what? It's a real bad day for me today. Camera's off. Not even getting out of bed. That's quite a red flag, I would think, to that group and to that business and to that employer. How do you respond to that? Because the response isn't just to go back and rely on some of the generic stuff that you might be doing, is it? I don't think.
I'm wondering, you've just said something that I think is really, really critical. There's a lot out there, and it is noise and it is tick box to some extent, and it's very general. And sometimes, and I know this personally, the more there is, the less right I feel to feel the way I do. Therefore, I don't want to tell people, so there's so much, and that I wonder if that has an impact here. Like, my employer's doing all of this stuff. How can I possibly go and say I feel really rubbish?
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know people's thoughts on that.
And I think there's still that, that bit about maybe if it's a status thing, it's not about status, but about a hierarchical thing about this is the level I'm at. I can't possibly I can't possibly be open and honest. I do think, and I think as an industry, I think we've still got some of that. I think that's probably something about our demographic as a sector. I'm sure there's an element of that, but there's some really. So I think my summary would be, there's stuff's not getting better; it's getting worse in terms of how stressed people are. We've identified what those areas that are particularly driving it. So that's a good area of focus for businesses to think about. How can they provide more support? What can they do to it's not always support, but what can they do to manage that impact? So I think that's what comes out of there. There's a great bit about awareness increasing and support increasing, but there's just this mismatch about is that really landing? So I think for me that would be just a reflection on what businesses are doing to support their teams and their colleagues, and are they doing the right stuff? But I think that for me, that's what this year's survey kind of helps point towards a little bit.
What is it? What do you guys do after these results come out? What changes does Ecclesiastical look to make after this type of contradiction or survey results?
Well, I say there's sort of two sides to that, I guess. There's what do we do to support our colleagues, and then what do we do to continue to support brokers? And we're in that same camp as lots of other businesses, in that we support our colleagues in a number of different ways. They've everybody has got access to different resources and different materials and different webinars and what have you. I think thinking about it from how do we use this to continue to support our brokers? Well, pretty much from all the time that we've been running the survey, we've set out to try and provide material in different mediums that does help brokers, either from an awareness point of view, from an education point of view, provoke a conversation point of view, I would suggest. We've in the last 12 months, we've sponsored 2 cohorts of brokers to go through mental health first aid training. And as part of our broker support, a wider broker support program, that's where we continue to work with Claire Russell at Mental Health in Business, and there's webinars, again, that brokers can find on the website. There's one still scheduled for this year to go live, and I'm confident we'll continue that into next year. So the themes of those webinars, the themes of that content, I think is how we use this research. What can we take from this research that that then informs us about what might resonate best, what might provide the best support. So I think it's something that I see as continuing. I definitely see us continuing to provide that support in the way that we can. And then it's kind of out there then, isn't it? Then it's down to individuals to how they choose to consume it or not to consume it. It's out there for businesses to provoke a conversation. And we're very happy to have a conversation about what we're doing. And if that helps support any brokers in any way, I'd be delighted to have that conversation. But that's more about what we're doing around the subject, not specifically about mental well-being.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous what you guys do. And I think thinking back to our conversation this time last year about the results, I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes next year. And we'll have to do this again, and just see what kind of the trends are. And I think it's really important to have the trends, because you can't make changes unless you know what's going on. So well done to the team at Eccles. I think you guys do a fabulous job. And again, really enjoyed chatting to you this morning, Adrian. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. So it's great.
Thanks for listening to the Insurance Brokers podcast. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to subscribe on your chosen podcast streaming platform and check us out on YouTube.